I'm really excited about this panel and these four wonderful young adults that are going to speak with us about their perspective. So thank you so much for joining us. First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Laura Bratt. I'm running for San Ramon Valley Unified School District's Board of Trustees in Area 3. I think that we can all agree that our goal is to deliver a strong, supportive, and safe educational environment for all of our students. But to do this, I think it's so important to listen to and to learn from those who actually are experiencing the educational environment in our district. So I'm super excited to shine a bright light on these four Dougherty Valley class of 2020 graduates, and more importantly, inspiring activists as we discuss their perspectives as students on inclusion, equity, and mental health in our schools. So first, I'd like to introduce Tiana Day. Tiana, why don't you take it from here?
Hey everyone, first of all, sorry for the awkward little setting here. I was coming back from a protest meeting. So I'm Tiana Day. I'm a Black Lives Matter activist, just fighting for racial justice. I'm what organized a lot of protests. If you heard about the Golden Gate Bridge protest with over 50,000 attendees, I organized that in 18 hours, and I founded a nonprofit called Youth Advocates for Change to inspire the youth and get them amplified, make sure that we're supporting each other and they have a place to turn to when they want to get involved in things. So that's me. Okay, and now Anusha, why don't you go next?
Hi everyone, my name is Anusha. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm in high school. I was really involved in Circle of Friends, which is an inclusion club between special needs students and the general population, and trying to kind of break down that line of difference and just incorporate the two groups together. So yeah, I was the president of that for my senior year and vice president my junior year, and currently I am a student at UCLA.
Cool, welcome. Jared, why don't you go next?
Hello, my name is Jared Fisher. I will be speaking for the LGBT students. My junior year, I was the secretary at DVHS's GSA, and I'm currently a DVC student getting ready to transfer to St. Mary's College of California. My pronouns are any, because I vibe with whatever.
And Alliah?
Hello, my name is Alliah Patricio. I'm currently majoring in music, and I'm also an avid mental health advocate. So I created my own charity campaign called Project AFSP in 2019 in order to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Month, which is May. I raised money by designing and selling t-shirts and hoodies for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and this year, because of the pandemic, I couldn't do the same thing, but instead I ran like a little bake sale so that I could still raise money and awareness for mental health and suicide prevention.
Very cool. I'm so glad you guys are here. I have to say that I am, as I've been campaigning and meeting people, it's the students that are it's amazing the level of engagement that you guys have coming out of our schools. And I think that there's things that we can change and things that we can fix, but the bottom line is that our school district is producing students and advocates like you, which is exciting for me as a parent, for sure. So, so let's start with the topic of inclusion. And Anusha, I'm going to ask you the first specific question. So you have specific insight into inclusion with our special education students, given that your sister's experience with SDC classes and your advocacy with Circle of Friends. So from your perspective, how do you think that our schools can foster an environment where all students feel like they are a part of the campus experience?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing I wanted to also talk about before I get into my answering that question is, I personally think after my experience, not only at Dougherty, but just throughout my experience in this district, I feel like this idea of inclusion is almost a contradiction within our district. And the reason why I say that is because our school, I do recognize our school has so many programs and things like, for example, Circle of Friends is one of them. Best Buys is another. There's so many, the list goes on, to provide special needs students with these resources, to provide them with a sense of inclusion. But we don't embrace them in all aspects of our environment and school. So how do we go about that? How do we say we're inclusive just in this one aspect of school, and when we go out, where does that go? So that's the first thing I really just wanted to put out in the air, this idea that I think everything I'm going to say is kind of revolved around this idea of I recognize that we do have inclusive opportunities, but I think the first that our district needs to acknowledge is that we need to embrace them. And the first thing I'm going to say about that is implementation is a really big thing. And I think when I noticed throughout my educational experiences that the special needs students walked into if they were in my class, if they had the luxury and opportunity to be in my classroom, which I believe they should be, they would come in 5 to 10 minutes late. So we see this line of difference where they're already coming in late. They can't just walk in like us normally. So how do they feel good in an environment where they're automatically getting stares the second they walk into a room? Additionally, with Circle of Friends, something that I did was I noticed that throughout my whole experience in school, that there was this isolation between the group of students in the cafeteria specifically. And what I wanted to do was just completely break that down and bring them all over the cafeteria and sit them around and show our general population that they deserve to be with us and that you need to normalize their presence in this school environment because they exist and they're important. And I think bottom line, we need to embrace them as special needs students in all aspects. And another thing I wanted to touch on is this idea of representation as well. I think this is one of the most important things that I'm going to mention is, and speaking in regard to my experience with my sister auditioned for every single drama play from freshman to senior year and was never selected in any of them. Tried for leadership, was never accepted. Tried for basketball, never accepted. How do we say we're inclusive when we don't provide them they know their condition. Most of them do. So like they already know that most of us have the ability to pursue things like college or jobs, but they already know that they can't do that. So when they know that they can't do that, but they also can't participate on campus, it's like, where do they feel like they have any worth? And the last thing I just wanted to say is, I think it's important to shed light on post-graduation because I don't think we get enough attention toward the post-graduation and what happens when they're done with high school. And my sister just finished high school, and now she's in this transition program. And to give you all context, transition is where a lot of them go, where they're able to go where they still remain within the district after high school. And just to also give you context on the location, transition is in the parking lot of Del Amigo High, aside from San Ramon Valley High School. There's no computer lab. Lunches, you have to go to San Ramon Valley High School cafeteria to grab your lunch. And that's pretty much it. So your school is in a parking lot and you don't have any access to the materials that you need. So it's basically a downgrade from high school. And community college or any form of college or any choice that they want to do is not encouraged whatsoever. So especially in a district where we are very encouraging, we encourage practically every student to apply to college. So how do we have this, which is fine. And I think we should have both. I think we should embrace both and provide both. But if we're going to have that environment, how can we make it so that the special needs community is a part of that? And how can we make them feel important and not literally pushed to the side in a parking lot is my question. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think those are all really important issues. And I feel like in some sense, the common thread with all of those specific situations that a special education student is in that's different from a mainstream student, I guess, is this feeling of otherness, right? It's like this idea that they're different, so they can't be in the play, or I shouldn't say can't, but they're not selected, right? So it like you said, it feels like they're not good enough, right? Because it's not that they can't be in the play, but there should be an opportunity for them to be able to be in the play, because there's it's performance art. I mean, it's something that everyone should be able to do, and this sense of otherness too with Del Amigo, and how it's like, they're seeing all of their peers, that their graduating class graduate and go on to college, and yet they're moved over to yet another high school. I mean, it's labeled high school, right? I know you and I talked about that, it's Del Amigo High School. Why isn't it Why isn't it Delamigo College? Why isn't it, you know, something else? And even, you know, even if they can't legally use that word or whatever, they can come up with a word that's different than high school, right? And then giving them those opportunities in that postgraduate time where they can, you know, we have this wonderful PLI program, you know, that everyone touts, and it has, you know, great benefits. Why not reach that out, give the special education students those benefits as well, where they can start to take DVC classes along with their Delamigo classes, you know, and have that support as being a transitional student, have that support to be able to you know, to baby step into whatever, wherever they are, and however, whatever works best for them individually, but give them some lifeline into that postgraduate education that goes beyond just a transitional high school, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any thoughts, any experience with being at Dougherty Valley with the SDC classes? And was anyone else in Circle of Friends?
I didn't get to join, but I did know a couple of people who were in it. I believe her name was Rebecca. She was also in the dance 1, I believe. I've seen her dance on stage. She was in my yoga class my sophomore year. She was really nice, but it was kind of like she would come hang out with me and my friends, and we talked to her and everything. But there were like these group of girls that used to just like look at her and think like, oh, like, why is she over there talking to them? Like, or they'll come up to me like, isn't it weird that you're talking to her? I'm like, why would you think that? Like, she's in the class with us. Like, there's nothing wrong with her being there. So why not let her vibe? She's doing like dance on the stage. I've seen her. She literally does amazing every time. Like, I see Alliah and Anusha nodding. Like, we've been to the dance shows. Alliah were you in a dance show with her?
Yeah, senior year.
Yeah, so the inclusion, but then look at people weird when they actually, you know, participate is kind of baffling a bit.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that because I was in the dance program also for a year. I feel like for just the way that, I mean, we've all went to Dougherty Valley High School. So speaking within Dougherty, I feel like a lot of the times we try to, like, our admin tries to be very inclusive.
Oh no. Oh.
Wait, Tiana, you're muted.
Oh.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Gosh,
okay.
Technical difficulties. It's okay. Nobody's perfect. But what I was saying was, like, I feel like at Dougherty Valley, like, we are very inclusive. We're a very progressive school, but it's the way that the fact that the students don't understand, like, we should have lessons, like teachers should be encouraging us it should be implemented, like we should be having to speak to, like, making friends, you know, like I feel like everyone should have to be part of Circle of Friends. Like, it should be a school-wide thing because it's important we're being inclusive of all people. We don't want anyone to stick out like a sore thumb. And I think all of us have had that moment, especially me as like a Black student. I'm sure Jared, you can agree. It's just like, I feel like there's a lot of times where we just stick out like a sore thumb, and I can't imagine like the students that are in the special needs program feel that pressure. And, you know, we don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable, but there's always going to be high school bullies that have something to say and have something to like joke about. And it's really sad, in all honesty. I mean, it's very unfortunate, but I think we have the power to change that by just educating our friends, talking about it, creating the conversation, having panels like this, and being able to like befriend those people. So Anusha and I have been friends since we were in kindergarten, actually, and she's literally one of my biggest inspirations for creating something so powerful and getting involved in high school. And I wish that I was a part of something so amazing, but I just, kudos to you, Anusha. I'm just so proud of you. This is awesome.
Well, and I think that to your point, it's important to kind of shift the dynamic so that it's about celebrating people that are different, as opposed to looking at them, you know, really through I mean, honestly, I think from my, you know, I'm quite a bit older than you, but from my experience, this idea of, you know, when you see something different, you know, sometimes you're afraid, and then that manifests itself into bullying, or that that uncomfortableness, you know, makes you feel like you need to protect yourself and lash out because you just don't know, right? As opposed to seeing something that's different and seeing that difference as something that is exciting and that you want to learn about and that you want to you know, you want to explore more and you want to find out, well, you know, what is it like to be, you know, to be you? How, you know, how cool is that? You know, I wish, you know, I could be you know, that kind of thing, as opposed to, oh my gosh, you know, and so shifting that. And I think that that can come from, you know, adults modeling, and that can come from students modeling that behavior, and that can come from education in the curriculum, and, you know, a variety of different things. And then also creating policies so that those students feel like they're safe in these environments as well, right? Because there is, especially with bullying, and you become, I think, when you're seen as something to be, your people are feeling uncomfortable around you, and so they're lashing out. You then, as that person, feels disempowered because you aren't able to really be yourself, right? Because you're creating this reaction around you that's, you know, just not really cool, you know. You know, I guess basically. And Jared, I want to ask you specifically how, like, you know, from your perspective as an LGBTQ plus student of color, amazing, what was your experience with inclusion, and how did it affect you during your time specifically at Dougherty Valley?
Well, I mean, besides having like an amazing group of friends and having GSA run by Allison Gardner, shout out, love you. It was kind of a little, I kind of flew under the radar sometimes. I didn't want to go and do certain things because I didn't want to be perceived as a certain way, despite the fact that, you know, anyone's opinion is whatever, I live with it, whatever. But when it came to certain things like going to football games, I'd be kind of, sometimes like part of me would be scared to go because I'm like, oh, I don't want to get like hate crimed or something, or I don't want to get someone start something in the stands because I wanted to show up in the makeup and like be in a tutu, but I never could do that because, you know, I didn't want someone to be like, oh, like you gay, very much no. When it comes to like academics, it would be nice to go through the health unit without it being really like heteronormative. I remember my freshman year of health, we were talking about like sexuality and sexual orientation, and someone was like, well, how would that work? And my teacher could not answer the question, and I had to. Like, she asked me like, oh, like, Jared, like, what do you know? I was like, I'm a freshman. And it's kind of awkward because you kind of get put in these like weird situations, and you kind of like don't really have people to relate to. So when it comes to those certain things, it's a little, I remember our previous assistant principal, Miss Viana. I don't know if you guys remember her, but she was amazing, awesome advocate for our LGBT students, our minority students, like pretty much anyone she was there for. I miss her so much. But when she left, it was like a weird gap. Not saying like the new, you know, faculty, assistant principals, I love them. They're awesome. But it was kind of scary. I had GSA, and that was pretty much it. GSA and a good group of friends.
Well, and I think it's certainly important to make sure that there are allies on every campus for all groups, you know, that everyone has a safe place to go to when they're feeling marginalized, and you know, regardless of whether they're even aware of it or not. You know, I think it's important to just know that this person, or that someone has my back, that someone, you know, there, that's in charge, that has that higher power dynamic, is going to stand up for me, you know, when I'm feeling like I'm, you know, uncomfortable, or whatever the situation may be.
Because it's hard to fit in a certain demographic of students, you know?
Yeah. And I think that, to your point with the curriculum with health, I think that it's, and I know Tiana and I talked a little bit about this, that it's so important to make sure that that specifically that the curriculum reflects, you know, the diverse community, right? So that a kindergartner can pick up a picture book and can see that gender is a spectrum, right? That you know, that a fifth grader can pick up a book and learn about, as they're kind of discovering their crushes, learn about how it's okay to have a crush on someone of the same gender, that, the eighth grader can pick up a love story and see that there's, that there's beauty in every kind of love, like that kind of thing. Right. And specifically with health, that you're not put in a situation where, you become that poster person, right? You become the person that's explaining to everyone else, and therefore now you're once again othered, right? Like you're the one that's not normal, you're the one that's different, and the teacher doesn't even know about you, so you have to explain it, and it's not, and it's, I'm sure from that teacher's perspective, they want to make sure they got it right. They wanted to, that kind of thing, they were doing the best that they could. But you need to, I think certainly as a school district, you need to make sure that the people that are educating the kids have the resources and the knowledge to be able to fully embrace and understand and celebrate. Again, I'm going to say it again, celebrate the differences in everyone, as opposed to, being afraid of it or not knowing where to step and what path to take, because there's, it's scary for people, and not necessarily for the teacher, but how is that parent of that one student going to react when, the teacher says it's okay to kiss someone the same gender as you, right? Well, Miss Smith told me that, it's okay for me to love, whatever, right? And then that parent, there's so much culturally that has to be broken down before, we're really able to fully, have inclusive education. But I think that it's important for us to talk about it, acknowledge it, and take those steps to be able to move it, shift it, and move it forward. So absolutely. All right, so we need to, I know we only have an hour, so to move on to the next topic, which is equity. So, and I'm going to specifically ask Tiana a question. So tell us about your perspective as a student of color here in SRVUSD schools, and how equity has played a part in your educational experience specifically.
Yes, great question. And before I just want to touch really quickly back on what Jared was talking about, and, being that token person for, how he's had been that token person for the LGBTQ plus community. I feel really similar, but in the way that I was like one of the only Black girls in the area. And just growing up in this community, I don't think people realize, I've been here since I was 4 years old. This is all I know. I've been labeled the whitewashed Black girl. I've been labeled ghetto. I've been labeled a criminal. I've every single type of stereotype possible. And I'm also biracial. So if that doesn't help, I'm half Filipino and half Black. And there comes so much, I think it's not talked about enough, like just children who are mixed have this ongoing life identity crisis. Some of my family on my Asian side doesn't even support my mom's relationship with my dad. They've been together since they were 19, like around my age. So it's just a lot. I faced like a lot of racism and discrimination within my own just like upbringing, and just living in this, having the privilege to live here. And talking a little bit more on that, my dad was born in Richmond. He was raised in Richmond. It is a really rough part where gang violence and weekly shootings, police brutality is very, very common. And he works 5 jobs to keep us in a house in San Ramon. My mom also came out of South San Francisco. She works as well. I have had to take care of my sisters my whole life, and kind of just be very independent growing up. And in all honesty, it's been just a struggle. I've always wanted to be someone that I wasn't. And I was reading my diary like last night of back when I was in 8th grade, and I literally read a line. I literally hate being Black. I said that. I said, I literally hate being Black. I hate living here where I feel like I have to be someone that I'm not. And I can't wait till I graduate high school and I feel like I don't have to do that anymore. And I would always straighten my hair in middle school. I would always wear these big glasses so you wouldn't see my face. And I would miss out on every single beach trip with my friends because I didn't want to get darker. I didn't want my complexion to be any darker than it already was. I was so ashamed of who I was. I hated who I was. I felt so ugly all the time. And that translated into me developing an eating disorder that I'm still coming over today. And like, just having so much self-hatred for myself. I struggled with mental illness a lot. I was depressed. I was suicidal. I still struggle with anxiety till this day. And that all goes back to the way that I feel like I've been treated in this district just by other students. And when I told Laura the story one time that I was trying to fit in with the Black girls in high school when I first got to high school, because there's a bigger population of Black students, not huge, but like, there's like maybe 2 or 3 more Black kids, and I wanted to be friends with them, and they weren't from this area. They, their parents work super hard so they can be here. And I remember talking to them and like trying to befriend them, and they're like, you're so whitewashed, you can't even hang out with us. So I was like, okay, I can't hang out with the white girls because I'm too Black for them. I can't hang out with the Black girls, I'm too whitewashed for them. And I tried to really, really fit in with them. Long story short, we ended up getting into a really big fight, big blowout, and they jumped me. Like I had a concussion. I was out of school for 2.5 months with severe brain trauma. I wasn't able to go back to school, and I had to actually enroll in venture and independent study. So my high school career, my career in this district, at the end of the day, all comes back to just like all the traumatic stuff that's happened. Adding on to that, I just feel like there's so many things that we need to be talking about. Like we don't talk about Black history except for in February, and there's so much more to history than the narrative that white America gives us. And the honest answer is none of us came from America. We all came from somewhere else. No one, colonizers came from here. So my biggest issue is, where I started a podcast that Laura's going to be on, and hopefully every single person on this panel will be on as well, talking about student voices in this community especially. And like I said, I started a nonprofit. It's called Youth Advocates for Change. You can check out our website, youthadvocatesforchange.org. Our Instagram is Youth Advocates for Change. And it's all about amplifying youth voices and making sure we're implementing curriculum and making it more diverse, making it more equal, and making it more inclusive to all people. We need to cater to everyone, because as our society changes, our education should be changing it as well. And the biggest thing that started that was when I was a freshman at Dougherty Valley. We were reading To Kill a Mockingbird, and my white teacher was reading the book. She would read it out loud, and she would say the N-word in it, and it just made me feel very uncomfortable. It made me feel like I couldn't speak up about it, because I didn't want anyone to label me as sensitive, and I didn't want people to think of me as someone who like cared so much. It's just a joke, it's just part of the book. And it really bothered me, because she would literally only call on the white kids to read it, and maybe that's just in my mind, or maybe I thought too much into it, but I'm always second guessing myself and overthinking everything I do, and being like, is this racist or is it not? But either way, I shouldn't invalidate myself, because I feel some type of way about it and I feel attacked. And I never, ever, like in my whole years of being in this district, felt like I could speak up about something that related to that. Therefore, 3 days after I graduated, I did my first protest, and 3 days later did another protest across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I've never felt more me. I've never felt like, I just feel like this has just been lifted off me. And it's that pressure that is in school for me to be someone that I'm not, because I'm not accepted. Like I was a very bad kid growing up, and I'd gotten into trouble before. And I feel like that is because that is the stereotype that they want us to be. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, but last thing, there's this thing called adverse childhood experiences. And it's basically the more traumatic events you experience in your life, the more at risk you are to incarceration, the more you're at risk to at-risk activities, the more you get involved in criminal activities. And people ask this question all the time, is like, why are Black people incarcerated so much? Why are the rates so high for crime within like minority populations? It's because one of those adverse childhood experiences is already discrimination. We're already discriminated against, and we don't get to talk about mental health within our own communities, because we're taught to be strong, and you're like, you have to be a strong, passionate Black woman, you can't do anything else. If you're less than that, you're weak. And we're brought up to be like, have to be hard, and we have to put all this pressure on ourselves to like not be a baby, that kind of thing, because it's already within society. Like we are lower than everyone else as Black Americans. We are lower than every single person. That's how America started off, like as us as slaves. So we feel like we have to prove ourselves to be something that's a lot bigger. And yeah, so sorry for rambling, but yeah, that was just like big mind dump.
Sorry, I was muted. I think that's great. I mean, I think that it's more than just, it's not as simple as this, but I think that the fact that you've had to walk through life not really feeling like like we talked about before, you've seen yourself reflected, you don't know where you fit in, and you're not feeling valued in the space that you're in, throughout school, right? It's like you always had to kind of walk on, toe that line and be, even the fact that you said I was a bad kid. Well, I mean, honestly, were you really any worse than anyone else on this panel or me or any of my kids? I mean, really, but it's like, where do I fit in, and who am I, and how do I, this is what people are saying. So, must be what I, that kind of thing. Right. And then coming out of that and stepping into your full self now and being able to feel empowered, right? And not having, when you were in school, not really feeling that empowerment. And so how does a school environment support every student so that they aren't having to, in their head, constantly think about, I need to fit in, I need to find my group, I need to be, I'm different than this and this, and I need to figure it out, right? Instead of, I'm different, isn't this great? And again, go to that, let's celebrate it. And why don't we, as we're talking about To Kill a Mockingbird, why don't we speak to Tiana about how she feels about that word? Let's talk about it. Let's be brave about it. And as opposed to, well, I don't really, I'm going to make Tiana feel uncomfortable. I'm not realizing I'm doing that, but I'm making Tiana feel uncomfortable, making everyone in that room uncomfortable, and never really moving forward and talking about it, because it's a book that has history, and there's a lot to talk about around it, and but when there's that fear, because you don't know, it becomes a part of that narrative, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, and I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that. Jared.
Did you want to go first?
I was just going to touch really, really quickly just on, like, it doesn't even have to be like teachers acknowledging someone straight up. It could be like, I think that we need, as a district, need to implement a lot of like teaching for teachers, like you were talking about in the beginning. Like, I would have loved if my teacher would have pulled me aside after class, maybe not said my name in front of the whole class, but like, Tiana, how do you feel about this? Like, genuinely, like, I care about you, I care about your opinion, and I know that this is a hard topic to talk about. And for everyone watching this and thinking about this, and it's on your mind, like, slavery unit is a very hard topic for Black students to learn about, because it's like everyone's staring at you. They know that is oppression that has been built in your head. Like, I did not ask to be Black. And if you would have asked me a bunch of years ago if I would rather have been born white, I would have said yes. And that is like the most, I try to be as authentic as possible, because it's the truth. And it's a lot of Black kids are ashamed to say it. And I'm ashamed to say it, but I'm finally learning to love myself, and other people don't have this problem. So I think if teachers were just like, they were able to like connect with the student one-on-one, that would even just build a better relationship with the student. Like, if I got pulled over after class and been like, are you okay with us reading this word in schools? And at the same time, not every student is gonna, some students may feel like, oh my gosh, like, you're centering me out, like, blah, 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 it's not that big of a deal. It's different from every student, but I think it's important that teachers understand that, all students are different, and they need to kind of do this all-inclusive learning thing and just understand where people are coming from, because teachers want to help our students. And I know that my teacher didn't mean any harm doing that, but I didn't feel comfortable enough speaking up. So go ahead, Jared.
It's kind of piggyback on what Tiana said. It's kind of like a little bit the opposite for me. When we read To Kill a Mockingbird, my teacher actually did pull me aside, and she asked me, she's like, oh, does this make you uncomfortable? I was like, well, the whole point of the book is to make you uncomfortable and to confront that, uncomfiness. So I wanted the class to read, I wanted them to understand. And in doing that, she actually went more in depth into the book, and we learned more and more about it. And with the slavery unit in history, that's definitely super uncomfortable. We both know the feeling of when they start talking about slavery and like half the class turns around and looks at you, or when they'll like blatantly make jokes like, oh, did you know Harriet Tubman? Was she your ancestor? Was that your great grandma? And the fact that has happened, I don't know if it's happened to you, Tiana. I've been in class where it's happened and the teacher said nothing. And I don't blame the teacher, but I feel like definitely like what Tiana said, training for teachers so they understand that A, that on any level was not okay, and B, there should be consequences for those sort of actions, because that is, racist, and they should be held accountable for their actions. I've heard incidents that my mom told me about that she got very passionate about. She's telling me how a Black student, I believe, at my old middle school, was spit on by another student and called him the N-word. And the Black student defended himself because he got spit on. The dude was hitting him. And the aggressor, was suspended for a total of 3 days. And the Black student, that was like 2 weeks. Do you remember it? So honestly,
that happened at our school,
in our district.
I don't remember that, but I know for sure that I'm not surprised. And that's the sad part, is like, I'm not surprised that, you know, they also got charges. I mean, not charges, but like, you know, they got in trouble for it too. Like, it's sad that doesn't surprise me that they got a longer, you know, a longer suspension.
Because I've been told all my life, if bullying something, you defend yourself, right? But how am I to defend myself as a Black student in a like predominantly like white school? How am I supposed to defend myself if defending myself gets me in trouble, you know?
And I think on top of that, like, sorry, Laura, I know you have a bunch of questions, but like, I feel like that is already part, like, that is part of Black culture, is like, you have to defend yourself. You have to be strong. You have to do this. And like, we don't have a choice. Like, we don't really have a choice. Like, I have to defend myself if something happens, because we are already thought of by society to be weak. So we have to prove our strength. We have to fight. We have to do this. We have to, in some people's case, you know, like, act ghetto, act hard as a Black person in order to prove that we have dominance, that we have strength, and we are these people who, you know, have been, it's all comes down to like generational oppression. I mean, generational pain. And like, I tell the story all the time.
And being disempowered, like,
yes,
for generations.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like, for me, I never, like I said, involved in activism, never involved in leadership, didn't care about it, didn't want to be part of it, didn't want to be labeled that person who got involved and was all, you know, good and whatnot. And then I come to realize my dad was leading protests when he was my age. My great grandfather was part of the Black Panther movement in Oakland. And I didn't find this out until I started leading protests. My dad was embarrassed to tell me because he didn't want me to feel that, you know, we had to fight for this. He wanted me to grow up in San Ramon and not have to deal with any of it. He wanted me to grow up whitewashed and grow up like this. He married an Asian woman, so he didn't have to have a full Black kid. Like, we've had these conversations. Like, he knows the pain that it comes with, like, being raised and having to be a Black American. Like, it's not an easy thing. And I think that just sums it all up. It's like, this is generational. I didn't know any of this. I didn't know any of my family history, and I just had it in me. Like, I had this fire and passion. And I think that whole, like, acting hard and acting like, you know, we have to fight all the time and just being like that, it comes from this generational, like, pain and trauma that our ancestors once had to do and go through.
Yeah, and do you think, again, back to curriculum, do you think that if our history curriculum and social studies curriculum really celebrated, you know, all of the things that every culture has had to deal with, then it doesn't become a silence thing that you need to ignore and you need to run away from. It becomes something that you can embrace and be like, you know, my grandfather, you know, he was part of Black Panthers, and my gosh, that is the most exciting thing, and I am so proud of it. And, you know, and my dad's proud of, you know, that kind of thing, as opposed to, oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, just that idea of learning about it, seeing yourself reflected and celebrating it.
Absolutely. And like, that is another thing that I was just talking about, like, within curriculum, how we need to implement, like, LGBTQ authors into our education. We need to implement, like, women authors into our education. We need to be implementing women of color, like, empowering all types of people, celebrating all types of people, because I promise you guys, I could cry right now, promise you that if I was represented in the district, in the education I was learning when I was growing up, I would not have hated myself. I would not have said, I wish I wasn't Black. I would have, you know, I would have been so much more happy and just, like, proud to be who I am. And I didn't get to do that. And the thing is, white kids, the difference is they are able to do that.
They get to,
because it's like, they look up to Christopher Columbus. Imagine, like, a kid who has indigenous, like, they come from an indigenous family and, you know, native tribes, and they're realizing, like, oh, okay, well, I'm supposed to celebrate Christopher Columbus because he's our hero. But imagine if that kid just understood, like, wow, like, you know, my people used to have this land, and they can raise their hand and be like, I can relate. Like, we need to start having like kids raise their hand and be like, I can relate to that. Like, I see myself in our history. I see myself in my education. Like, I would have done anything in my power to make sure that like other Black students and other students, not just Black students, but every single race, like this Dougherty Valley at least is very, very diverse. And I grew up around a lot of South Asian and Asians, and I have no idea what their history is. I have no idea who the kid sitting next to me, the Indian kid sitting next to me, I have no idea what happened to him. How did he get here? Like, what were his hardships in order to get here to America? Like, there's so much we need to celebrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to move on because we want to talk about mental health, and I know it's especially Alliah, who's been a little quiet, has a lot to say. So I'm excited to learn more about that. So on the topic of mental health, social emotional wellness, Alliah, you know, you're a strong advocate for student mental health. So what are some specific issues that you've seen with student mental health during your time as a student?
Many. So students specifically at Dougherty Valley have this built-in mindset that their only purpose and their only value comes from their grades and the amount of time that they invest in their work instead of doing things like sleeping or working out or doing things that actually balance their life in a healthy way. And we're also in this like really obscure upbringing that we're not allowed to talk about our struggle and about our mental health issues. And so we just kind of let them manifest and we just bottle it up instead of talking about it and letting the issue become something that we can see and solve. When the class of 2020 took a mental and emotional wellness survey, there was some unbelievable statistic that like 20% of our class had experienced some sort of depression or suicidal period in their life, which is so saddening to think about because our class, I think, had like 800 kids. And when you do the math, that means about 160 of us wanted to kill ourselves because we didn't feel safe at school. And it doesn't even matter if it was school specifically or if it was something else, because school, if it's not your source of anxiety, it's at least somewhere you should feel separated from anxiety. Like if your anxiety source is home, you should feel safe at school. But if school isn't safe, where do you go? Because really, as a student, all you are doing is going to either school or home. And if both of those places don't feel safe for you, there's nothing you can do to feel safe, like you can address your mental health issues. It's just going to worsen them for you. And really, the unhealthy lifestyle that I want to say specifically Dougherty students have can be summed up into two statements. And that is that, one, they prioritize their work and their grades over their physical and mental wellness. And secondly, they don't have the permission or the knowledge to talk about what they're feeling. And some causes I would definitely say are how we create a workaholics environment for ourselves and for one another, and our home lives perpetuate that education-driven culture instead of promoting a balanced lifestyle. Now, as a side note, I do know that that's because we are predominantly like an immigrant school, so it's not something that is necessarily seen in every other school district or every other school within SRVUSD. But it is something that's going to take many generations to lift and ease from the student mindset that they're only needed to learn, and that's the only thing that they can do. Specifically at Dougherty, there's this really evident do all the things kind of culture, and you have to do everything in order to achieve a specific goal or a grade or a status. Honestly, I hate that this is a thing, but your social status depends on your grades at Dougherty. It makes zero sense, but it does. And really, we shouldn't be thinking about how packed can I make my schedule. You should be thinking about what am I passionate about and how can I balance what I'm passionate about with my mental and physical health so that I'm carrying the two things I actually need in my life outside of school into my career and into my family and into the real world. And in order to make a difference, it's going to take many generations. That's no secret. It's going to take forever to get ourselves out of this habit, but we need to break down the taboo image and portrayal of mental health and instead treat it like what it is, and that's normal. We all deal with it. We all have it. Even if you're not diagnosed with a clinical anxiety, your mental health is still going to be something that you're going to have to address at some point in your life. And the vulnerability and the flaws and the unease that we have when it comes to daily living that's what makes us normal, and that's what we need to be taught and encouraged about in school. We should be encouraged to talk about our struggle, and we should be taught how to do it in a healthy way so that we're not overpacking our schedules and making ourselves feel less than. Because even for every panelist tonight, a lot of the issues stem down to how equity affects your mental health, how inclusion affects your mental health. So it is not some, I am of this race, of this gender, of this color, of this status, of whatever, and that's why I have mental health issues. It is not a one size thing. Like, everyone has it, and we just need to show each other that it's normal, and have teachers who will tell us that, hey, this is normal, this is how you talk about it, and this is how we can address it in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing what you were saying, and I think it really helps people to understand that mental health is complex, and it is something that certainly needs to be acknowledged, and needs to be talked about, and needs to be supported for everyone, not just the kids that speak up about it, or that don't, or that are even aware. Everyone. Mental health, just like physical health, you have to take care of your mind and your emotions, and in the same way that you have to take care of your muscles and your blood cells. So but I feel like there needs to be an understanding that our students, like a skill set that's taught to students early on, to everyone early on, so that they can talk about things, and that they feel safe, and that they feel like it's okay to acknowledge that they're sad, or they're scared, or it's just too much for them, or they're afraid to make a mistake, or instead of keeping it all inside. So then by the time you get to be in high school, you're walled up. And I know as an adult, even more so, and it takes so much work to then break out of those walls as you mature as an adult, and you realize, you learn things that you really would have helped had you learned those things, or at least been given the skills to be able to see a little bit more clearly when you were younger, and you built up those walls, right? Because I think that's part of it, right? It's like the stigma of mental health, the pressure, anxiety, the fear of making a mistake, the fear of not getting into the college, or not achieving what your parents, the expectations that your parents have for you, or your culture, or your friends, or yourself, and just being okay with just being fulfilled rather than achieving, right? That makes sense. Yeah, I feel like part of, one way to kind of, and I know that it's very complex, and it's much more than this, but one little step I think that can be made is just looking at, from an academic standpoint, looking at academic fulfillment more than just academic achievement. Like, how do we make sure that our students, graduate from this school district feeling fully empowered, and like they really enjoyed their educational experience, and they got a lot out of it, as opposed to, it's just, I had to do this, and this to get to there, and I don't care, it was just what I had to achieve. It wasn't what I wanted to do, or and so then that builds up that pressure, and you don't have the fulfillment that everyone needs in life to be able to really be, enjoy life, embrace it, be empowered, all of those things.
I want to quickly just add on that, because it just made me think about something. Alliah, I don't know if you, this is kind of a question, or an experience that I face, and I don't know if you have too, but for me personally, I have severe anxiety to this day. I've definitely been suicidal in the past. I've struggled with a lot of depression growing up. But there's also a stigma within our schools that it's if you do speak up about that, you're automatically labeled not oh yikes, she's depressed, and people turn to social media as well, our Finstas, which are, for everyone watching, parents and stuff, our spam Instagram accounts where all of our friends are on, or our Snapchat, our private Snapchat stories. And I know I for sure have, and we rant about these things, and we talk about I'm so drained, I have no energy left, school is making it so hard for me. And it is almost normalized to this point where it's like, we all know that that is so normal. And it's like, we don't even check up on each other. Like I have been crying out for help, like posting on my main Snapchat story. I'm not proud of this. Like old me, like the new me looks back and I'm like, I did not have to do that. But it's sad that we are craving so much validation and attention when it comes to mental health that we turn to social media and we post about it. Like I have literally posted in the past, like, school sucks, I'm literally want to kill myself on Snapchat, on Twitter, and people have retweeted that. Like I remember, I think that was like at the time, like I had like 50 Twitter followers and I got like 12 retweets, and I was like, oh my god, like I'm like going famous, I'm going viral, you know, like people are like retweeting my stuff, and I'm like, no, I think back at that now, like why did so many people feel that way? And it sucks that social media, like we can do that and we can talk about it, and it gets like just looked over. Like it's so normalized in culture today and parents don't realize it. But like during your darkest times, you often compensate by laughing about it and making jokes. And like these jokes are they're like, you know, they're real. Like I've definitely said some things that I just like, if I would have heard someone else say, be like, why would you say that? Like seriously, like, don't even joke about that. Like the jokes based on like just like mental health in total in general, I think it's just a very normalized culture that we have in society today, and it's a stigma that needs to be talked about in schools. It's a stigma that needs to be broken down. We need to be addressing these issues and creating these conversations about everything we're talking about today. We need to be creating the conversations in this district, and that is why I am just so blessed to be in connection with Laura. Like I'm not gonna juice you or anything, but like seriously, I'm just so grateful that we have someone who wants to kind of like amplify our voices and like talk about these things, create these conversations, because this is what the students need. This is not like someone running for school board should definitely like want what the students need, not what the parents need, and not what the teachers want. It needs to be about the students, because I have to learn and I have to go back and look at my high school experience and say, I hated high school. I'm gonna be so honest with you guys. I hated high school. I hated growing up in this district, but I didn't go off to school. I chose to stay here and do a gap year because I want to do everything possible in my power to make sure my sisters don't go through the same thing that I did in this district. Like I will be at every school board meeting. I will be talking to every person who is on school board once, you know, the election finishes and stuff. And I'm going to do my very best to make sure that other kids don't have it the way that all of us had it. You know, like I hope that we can all like after this, like bond together and work on a project or do something for the SRVUSD, because it's like inspiring. Like you guys inspire me, and I'm just so blessed to be in this position and be able to talk to you guys, and kind of just this is all intersectional. You know, we all feel the same things about high school, and I think it's amazing that we can, although it's such a terrible thing, we can all relate, and I know that I'm not alone. So just thank you for holding this platform and being able to have this conversation, because it's definitely what we need.
Thank you. Absolutely. Anusha, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I really want to go off of what Alliah and Tiana are saying about this idea of conversation. And I think going back to just really quickly to Kill a Mockingbird, if we're going to have a conversation about that, I think the first thing we should be saying is, why are we learning about racism from a white perspective is my question. Why are we learning about these things? And I think we need to be learning the real history. Who went through that experience? Who should we be hearing it from? Should I be having to write an essay about analyzing To Kill a Mockingbird with like something else? Or should we be sitting down having an ungraded conversation, first of all, not even about that book, about a real Black perspective about this conversation and how this racism that exists is linked from the start of this country and how it was never dismantled? I think that's the conversation we need to have, and it relates to everything. It relates to special education, it relates to mental health. These conversations need to be implemented and not graded. So whenever I learn something, I'm like, oh, like, wait, that's hitting me. But then I have to write an essay on it, or I have to have a fishbowl about it. And then I'm worried about that. I'm like, oh, this is such an important topic to be talking about, but why do I have to have this stress of a grade on top of it? And that just, I just think, why can't we just allow students to just have this conversation and just pass? Like, why, I don't understand like why the grades have to be such a big implemental thing. And I think one thing I want to talk about as well is this idea of like, we don't, the reason why mental health is such a big problem in our district is, in my experience, is because of the pressure that we put on students of what needs to happen after high school. And one big example, which I think everyone in this call can relate to, is the SAT, ACT, any form of standardized testing. it's, to me, I personally, I have very strong opinions about this if you know me, but I think that this is a test of my wealth, not my knowledge, period. I'm in UCLA and I've never had to take 60 math problems in 60 minutes. That is absolutely a robot aspect. I don't know how that's possible. I wasn't able to finish the test, and I think if we need to be implementing actual ways to, I know this standardized testing isn't a district kind of level problem, but I think if we're going to have these kinds of things for students to be doing, we should be fostering an environment that supports them through that process, because I don't have $500 every month to be learning about what's on this test. I don't. I had to learn it myself, and I think I don't remember a thing from that test anyways, so it wasn't beneficial. And I think rather than having to have students go through that, let's say, okay, let's have a workshop and let's all work together on this and work on how we can go through this together, rather than, oh, you need to get a tutor for this, sorry, or things like that. And I think mental health is so important. Like, we had something called breaking down the walls. That was amazing. I mean, but that was 1 week. I was in one of those days. And but what now? So it's like, thank you for this, was amazing, but what's going to happen now? Because, like, I think I think Alliah had Mr. Keith. If anyone remembers Mr. Keith, shout out to Mr. Keith. I mean, it's very simple. I don't understand like why our district makes it so difficult to implement 10 minutes of class. We would spend the first 10 minutes of class sitting in a circle, passing around the talking thing to hold, and just say how we're feeling, how we're doing. We created a difference, and everyone felt so open and supported. And that was a really big aspect of our class. And I think it's important. You could write an essay on that. I don't understand like why there's so many easy changes that we can make. And it all starts with having a conversation, one, and then two, embracing these things. Like, if we learn about, there are teachers out there at our district who do teach the real history, I watched 13th in one of my classes. We do learn about these things, but we don't have a conversation about why it's important, why all the teachers should be teaching it, not just one or two great teachers. It should, and they're all great, but I think we need to make that conversation. I shouldn't be learning about why the 4th of July is important. I should be learning about why Juneteenth is so important. Things like that, that we need to be implementing in our education with mental health, all around the spectrum. So sorry for my tangent.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, you know, from my perspective of being, you know, I won't say my age, but substantially older than you guys, you know, change is really hard, and it takes, you know, and it takes a while. But I think that the only way for things to get better is for people to be uncomfortable and for people to push for change. And I think that, like, you know, specifically when you talk about SAT and ACTs, I mean, I think that it's what's been done, right? So it's what, you know, it's what as parents we know works. That's what we're told. That's how you get into college, is you have a high SAT score. So I'm, as a parent, going to do everything I can, you know, but then you pull back and you think, well, wait, how is this? Is it really, you know, like, your perspective? Let's think about this realistically and see how it, from an equitable standpoint, where it, you know, where it lives, and also from like the real value of it. Like, you know, like you said, it's like, did that really affect you not being able to, it sounds like you didn't finish your math on the SAT, but yet you still got into UCLA. I mean, you know, I'm told by everyone that there's no way my kids will get into UCLA unless they have a near perfect SAT score and a great essay, right? Well, it's, yeah.
I will make clear that I bombed that. I just think I think our district needs to understand, and not just our district, like everyone in the world needs to understand that this test is, I don't understand like what it's trying to prove. I really don't, because if you can go to DVC without taking it, or community college without I don't know who created that. I don't know why it's a big deal. And also another thing that I quickly wanted to say is this, I think one thing that is really important that I need to mention about this idea of like pressure that Alliah was mentioning about fulfilling our filling up our list in academics, or what we're doing, is really big thing about volunteering that I think we should touch on really quickly. Is there's many clubs, I think they're all great clubs, but and they've helped me too with my circle of friends things, but there's many clubs that are all about hours for college. And I just think most of the volunteers at my events for Circle of Friends were chasing me down with their pens for me to sign their papers, or we don't really see an environment that fosters, let's do things because there's change that needs to happen in our society. There's change that needs to occur. Let's learn about why this is like, for example, let's learn about why celebrating the 4th of July is bad. Let's learn about why Christopher Columbus is bad, and let's change. What can we change? Let's learn about why racism exists and nothing's been done. Let's learn about that. And I think another thing too is let's learn about why helping in our community is important. That all connects to community service. That all connects to volunteering, rather than let me just go to talk with a special needs student for an hour and then get 4 hours out of it and then go to college. Like, that's just not how it works. And it's going to hit you once you graduate, wherever you end up. Once you finish in life, you're going to realize that there's actual problems that we have the power of solving and addressing. But if our district is encouraging it in the matter of college hours, like, how is that? It should be different. Like, why do we need to have hours for that? Why can't we just do it? Is my question.
Yeah, well, it has to do with, but it has to do with achievement versus fulfillment, right? It's like you need to achieve this many volunteer hours. You need to achieve a high score on an SAT. You need to, to get to point D, you need to achieve all of these things, as opposed to how do we look at education in a way that we're feeling fulfilled and we're truly learning, and we're still gonna, we're probably gonna get past point D, because we're gonna have this full experience that we can then take out into the world and really be fulfilled in our volunteers and really understand like where our passions are, really, really have a strong sense of who we are in the world, because we've been able to try things and not have to stay on that strict line of achievement, but be able to explore and make mistakes and, all those things. And again, I say that it's easy to talk about and it's super hard to change, because there's so much in our culture about what is expected, and it goes beyond just even what we as individuals see as necessary, but I think as whole, the way that the parents that are raising the kids, the world that they grew up in, and how they see achievement and the value of, and the fear of mistakes and those kinds of things. It's extremely complex. As all of this is, and it is 7:39. We are over by 10 minutes, so we need to wrap up. So
I say like so quickly?
Yeah.
I really quickly, before we sign off, I just wanted to say, like, the whole SAT score thing, I just don't, like everyone says, it doesn't represent how successful you are, what you're gonna be. I thought that I had to take an SAT thing. I had to do ACT. I did both of them. I didn't study for any of them, neither of them. I got literal, I'm sharing this for any students watching this or any parents watching this, because I think it's so important that we talk about this. My SAT score personally was a 960. Okay. And anybody hearing that is like, oh my God, she literally is so stupid. She's so dumb. Like, my ACT score was a 16, and I am doing like the work that I'm in now. Like, I founded my own nonprofit at 18. I've raised $25,000 to give out scholarship funds for Black youth. I've done all these things, like, and I like to think of myself as very successful in this exact moment. Like, I have articles with New York Times, and ABC7 just made a documentary. It came out last night. I'm working on all these different projects, and I'm not even in school right now. So I just want to put it out there, and like, to any students listening and watching at home, any parents who are putting a lot of stress on their students, it's your grades do not define you. Numbers do not define you. And that goes for GPA, that goes for a class, that goes for letter grades, that goes for a number on a scale for everybody at home dealing with an eating disorder too, because it doesn't define you. Nothing defines you. Numbers do not define you. And school should not be pressure. It should be somewhere where we all feel accepted and we can learn and be in a happy, good environment. So I just had to get that out there before we like signed off.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's perfect way to end. And I want to say that this hour that I just spent has been the most fulfilling part of my campaign. I think you guys are so awesome, and I love hearing your perspectives. And it makes me proud to be here with you. It makes me proud to have my kids in the school district, and it makes me excited for the future. So thank you so much for your time and your insights, and I know that we will talk again. So I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you for joining us, and that's all. So thank you.
Thank you, Laura. You're amazing, and thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Woo, yes, change.
Yes, love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.